Hi guys, this is Lalana. Thanks for tuning into the Sovereign Path. So today we're going to talk about a topic that keeps coming up in my coaching calls a lot, and I see this from time to time in the comments as well. And you know, it has a lot to do with before I started my awakening journey, before I was activated to go through my awakening journey, I felt really confident, right? I was a confident person. I felt full of, self-worth. And since my activation with my twin, I feel like I've lost all my confidence. I feel like I'm just not worthy anymore. I don't really know where this is coming from because I was really confident before meeting them and all of these sort of stuff. So even if that's not your story, right? Even if it's a situation where, you've never felt like you were, worthy of them or of dating in general, or if you've had like this, self-worth wound, which is very, very common, the core wound around self-worth, that wound is going to show up in different ways. This is a better way for me to say that. The core wound of self-worth is going to show up in two ways, generally. It's going to show up in a way of feeling overly confident, right? Feeling like you have everything together, you've always had everything together, you've always felt confident, you always felt you were worthy, but somehow, potentially, relationships didn't quite show up in the way that you wanted them to romantically for however long. Or sometimes they would show up the way you wanted to. Other times it was other times you felt like there was sort of an abandonment wound that kept running through your romantic relationships. For other people, it will be like you never really felt worthy of relationships, and so that kept showing up, or you never really felt confident. So it's either you're in that place of feeling overly confident to sort of hide the fear of, abandonment, the fear of not being good enough, and so it's like you're overly confident in order to sort of protect that aspect of you. Or on the flip side, you're sort of in the other arena where potentially at this point we're feeling sort of like in the victim mode and things like that, and feeling like we're not really confident, and it's difficult, to sort of be confident, right? Be due to this wound, due to the self-worth wound. So hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully that wasn't confusing. I have my little note over here, guys. Hold on just a second, just to make sure that I hit this question properly to answer it for all of you guys who have asked. So the first thing that I really want to say before I really dive deep into this is that your self-worth was built on a program, right? Your self-worth was based on the program that built it, right? Through whatever belief systems that you've taken on through childhood, through early adolescence, whenever it was, right? We have this idea in our mind, we have a belief in our mind based on all sorts of things that we take on as children, as we're growing up. Those beliefs become programs, and that program gets regurgitated over and over and over again, right? So it's cementing that belief that we had on some level that we weren't worthy enough. Right? And so the twin comes along, triggers that wounding, right? We're feeling really, really good in the beginning stages, whatever else in the bubble up phase. And then suddenly they take off. They run, they abandon you. And that core wound is reactivated. The core wound of feeling like I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy enough. And for a lot of people, the ones who have been masking that core wound of a lack of self-worth and that abandonment wound, for a lot of people, that's going to come up of being like, I don't understand why this is showing up in my reality because I've always been confident. Like I said before, I've always been confident. I've always felt like I had my shit together, all of those sort of things. So why now with the twin do suddenly I feel like I'm not worthy? Why do I feel like I don't have any confidence anymore? Where is this coming from? It's coming from the place that it was always there to begin with. It's just that some of us were masking it better than others, right? Some of us were thinking that we had it under wraps. Some of us potentially didn't even know it was there because we had gotten so accustomed to masking that wound in some level. And like I say, a lot of times being overly confident. So it's not that suddenly you aren't confident now that the twin has triggered this wound. It's not suddenly that you don't feel worthy now and you felt worthy before. That's what the mind is trying to say. The mind is trying to say, I was worthy before I met the twin. I was confident before I met the twin, or whatever. That's what the mind is saying, because that was the role that you were playing. It was the mask that you were wearing, right? We're all wearing masks. We're all playing roles in the three-dimensional separation, experience reality. We've all been wearing masks. We've all been playing characters. And those characters become who we believe that we are. They become who we identify with. And what happens is that when we go through the activation of the spiritual awakening and all of that stuff starts to break apart and the masks start to slip and the aspects of us that we have identified with start to fail, then we start to feel like, why am I not confident? Why can't I hold my shit together? Why do I suddenly feel unworthy? What's going on? This has never come up before. And then we start questioning, am I even on this path? Right? Am I even experiencing a spiritual awakening? Maybe this is limerence. Maybe I'm obsessed with this person. Maybe there's something else going on here, because suddenly I feel my life is starting to slip. And the aspects of me that I have been accustomed to, that I have been identifying as, that I have been defining myself as, are starting to slip. And one of these is confidence. One of them hugely is confidence and a feeling of, I felt worthy of this before. I felt worthy of that before. I never had any issues with this before. I never had any issues with that before. And so what's going on? What's going on is that on some level, whether those things were hidden, whether the core wound was hidden by several layers of the onion, whether it was hidden by us feeling like we were overly confident or whatever else, it was there. Because if it's being triggered, right? If these things are coming up and suddenly you're questioning, like, wait a second, I was this and that and the other, and so what's going on now? I've met the twin and now all of these things are coming up and I don't know where these things are coming from, right? In those moments, have the awareness that potentially they're coming from the deep aspects of us that have been covered up, that we were bypassing for however long. And this happens often on this path. And so this is why I want to bring it up, because I've coached a lot of clients through this recently, that this keeps coming up and they keep feeling like, am I actually experiencing this path? I don't really understand this part of the path that I'm experiencing, right? So the thing is that we don't remember, right? A lot of us, we don't remember every single solitary aspect of our childhood. We don't remember every single solitary aspect of every single solitary program and wound and pattern and belief system that we've taken on. And we also don't remember any sort of, techniques or tools that we adapted to in order to override that, or in order to make up for that, or in order to, it's the same thing as like a kid who's like, I never felt popular. And so suddenly I noticed that if I made kids laugh, then they paid attention to me, right? We use all of these methods as children without realizing really in the moment what we're doing. And that's a perfect one. And then so the kid decides, okay, well, I'm just going to be funny now because I get the attention that I need as long as I'm funny. And people actually, they like me when I'm funny. But before, when I wasn't funny, they weren't really paying attention. And so that becomes something that child adapted to in order to overcome some sort of wounding that they had taken on, right, in regard to feeling like not worthy not, being paid attention to, not being validated in some way, being looked over. And so now they're funny, and so now they get the attention that they needed, right? That's a technique that that child learned at a very young age, just basically by accident, right? And so the other techniques that we learn a lot of times is, if I'm aloof, then guys tend to pay more attention to me. If I'm overly confident, then girls tend to pay more attention to me. If I'm this, then that. And so suddenly we adapt to these things, usually like in elementary school, but sometimes, or grade school, depending on which country that makes sense to you guys, sometimes earlier than that. Sometimes we do this sort of thing like in nursery school and preschool. We start noticing what brings us attention. And so we don't really realize, because we grew up being like that. Now suddenly that kid who at 4 years old learned to be funny, and now at 30, he's still funny. But he doesn't remember potentially the reason that he adapted funniness in order to be made validated, in order to feel like he was included on some level, right? So we don't always remember how these things came about. We can be like, well, I've always been confident, right? I've never not been confident. But we don't necessarily remember where that overconfidence came from, and how potentially as children we adapted on some level in order to, make us feel worthy. That's what we do. It's human nature. It's what we do. And so, as I said, I've seen this come up a lot in my coaching, where people are like, I just don't know where this is coming from, right? I've always felt confident, and suddenly, I don't feel confident now. I don't feel worthy of these things now. It's because the core wound has been scratched. And on some level, you were covering that up, right? And you probably didn't even know you're covering it up. And it's more common than probably a lot of us talk about. And that's why I want to touch on it in this video. So, that unworthiness wound and all of those things, when we're over adapting to all of that stuff, we have to have that awareness. Okay, wait, the reason that I am being triggered in this way is because the twin who is me is reflecting parts of me that I may remember and I may not remember. It doesn't really matter. But if I'm being triggered by this, if this is coming up for me, then on some level that means that there's something there to be triggered, right? And so it doesn't really matter if I need to dig back in time, right? Time, and find it. What matters is on some level, I'm feeling annoyed by this, frustrated by this, something's coming up for me, I'm questioning this, whatever else, which means there's something there to be seen. If there wasn't anything there to be seen, then there wouldn't be anything triggering you, and you wouldn't be feeling anything, in a negative light. And so, as I said at the beginning of the video, we have this identity and this belief that this is what we are. This is who we've always been. This is the definition, of what we are and all of those sort of things. And without realizing, sorry, my hair got stuck in my earring. Without realizing the things that we have done to adapt ourselves to that way of being, to that way of life. But again, it's still a character that we learn to play. It's still a mask that on some level we learn to put on. And it's not the truth of what we are, right? It's not the truth of what you are as the I am presence, as the higher self, who is love, who is always love. We have been experiencing separation, and through the experience of separation, we've taken on all sorts of patterns and programs, and the ego has gotten very used to those patterns and programs, and it just keeps regurgitating it. That's what the ego does, as I've said in tons of videos. The ego brings things in, you believe things, you have these experiences, and all these beliefs get cemented, they get programmed into the subconscious mind, and they just continue to get regurgitated, And so unless we're bringing in new information that's overriding those neural nets, which is a huge part of what a spiritual awakening does, it's deleting the old program and rewriting it, right? So until that really actively starts to happen, these things are going to be coming up that's saying, but I was that. But in truth, you were never that. In truth, you were never like, I'm so confident, or I'm so funny, Or, you know, I've always been really like, you know, whatever, right? In truth, you were never that. In truth, you were just playing a role, right? We were all just playing roles. We were all just playing characters. In truth, what you are is love. In truth, what you are is union and oneness and abundance and authenticity, and not authenticity through ego, but authenticity through the higher self that is you having this experience. You know, in truth, that's what you are. The rest of it is what you have believed yourself to be in order to navigate and to experience the 3D matrix of separation. And so when we're going through the process of ego death specifically, and we start noticing things coming up, and we start noticing things breaking down, and we start feeling like, you know, but I've always been confident, and I've never had self-worth issues, and I've never, you know, felt like this before. Or on the flip side of that, you could say things like, I've always was happy before the awakening began. I was happy before I met my twin. You know, I had a great life before I met my twin. Why did this happen? Why am I going through the spiritual awakening? Now I feel like crap all the time, you know, and all of those sort of things. It's like we have to have the awareness that it's the ego that's feeling that way, right? It's the program that's feeling that way. It's the program that's saying everything was great before this happened. It's the ego that is attaching itself to all of these different labels and all of these things that we have been aligning to for so long. And that stuff's breaking apart. You know, it's breaking apart, and it's uncomfortable. It's very, very uncomfortable for the parts of us that are still unsure how to walk an awakening path and what to do with it and what that looks like. And, you know, I was this person before I started this path, and now I'm like this person, and I don't know who I am and what's going on, and I just want this whole thing to stop. All of that sort of stuff. You know, in those throes, in those moments, as difficult as it is, you know, it's still having the awareness that the ego isn't running the show here. The ego didn't decide to awaken. The ego is basically, yeah, it's being threatened. It's sort of crumbling away, and we have been identifying with ourselves as ego for so long and all of these other things that it just feels really uncomfortable. And, you know, I've said in a lot of videos, the thing about a spiritual awakening, and I talk about inner union all the time, you guys, I do, because inner union is shedding off all the layers of what you are not, exposing what you are, the remembrance of what you are, the revelation, you know, of coming back into the truth of oneness of what you are. But the thing is the shedding, right? The pulling away, the peeling off of the onion, it feels like shit. It does. You know, you can't really sugarcoat the fact that ego death feels like hell. You can't really sugarcoat it at all. You know, that's why parts of this path feel like the pit of hell. Part of this path feel like your whole world is falling apart, you know? And as I've said before, I'm talking about spiritual awakening and ego death full blown. I'm not talking about spiritual psychosis or any sort of, you know, mental disorders and things of that nature. I always feel that I have to say these things on these videos, unfortunately. So, you know, I'm not going to sit here and say, like, you know, this is an easy process. It's not an easy process. This is not an easy process, but it is a process that you as a higher self has chosen to experience in this lifetime. You are a part of the consciousness shift that is happening right now, which looks like complete and utter chaos in the external world, without question. It looks like chaos. It does. It feels like chaos. It's loud like chaos. But if you are actually going through a true spiritual awakening, which thousands of us are, have the awareness that this shedding off is exposing your light. The light that we need at this time as we're going through this massive shift in consciousness, which is planetary wide, right? And have the awareness as these aspects of you that are falling away are the egoic programs that you as a soul, as a higher self used to experience the 3D separation, but they are not what you as the higher self actually are in the true sense of what you are. The true sense of what you are is love, it's light, it's abundance, it's higher consciousness, it's the light of being, it's the higher awareness, it's the I am presence, it's God, source, creation. All that is experiencing itself in form and awakening itself up out of the separation, out of the ego, out of the program. And so when you look at it through those lenses, and when you start sort of shifting the script on what the ego is saying and what the mind is saying and what everything is looking like in the external reality, and have the awareness that you are part of a huge shift in consciousness that is assisting the planet right now, then potentially that will help a lot of you to really have the awareness of, okay, this stuff is shedding away, not to hurt me, not to make it feel uncomfortable as all hell, not to completely destroy or destruct my life, but because I am awakening, I am a wayshower, I am a light worker, I am here to assist, because you are, right? Have that awareness. This is bigger than just, I say this in tons of my videos, this is bigger than just a romantic partnership. And it's the reason that I'm always saying stuff like that, is because the twin flame, the twin flame, you are the twin flame. The twin flame aspect of you, the physical aspect of you who is incarnate, is reflecting you back to you, right? The true soul essence of you back to you, the true I am presence of you back to you, for you to awaken, for you to awaken, for you to allow these aspects of you that are not you to shed away, right? For you to remember that, no, it has nothing to do with Lalana being some confident person who she thought she was during all the years, leading up to the awakening. It's, oh, that was a role that Lalana was playing for however long, and now she's awakening out of that. And yes, that's super uncomfortable, because now potentially Lalana has no idea who the hell she is, right? And that is uncomfortable. So when you lean into the I am my higher self is who I am, right? I am my higher self is who I am. And maybe I don't remember exactly what that means in a lot of moments, but maybe if I sit and I feel into the energy of how that feels, and not the thoughts that are trying to create what that means behind it, but the energy of how that feels, which is why I'm a proponent of meditation, then maybe I can lean more into the higher awareness that this is soul-led, soul-guided, soul-orchestrated, and it has nothing to do with anything that the ego is trying to say and, to convince Lalana of, and all of these sort of things. Sorry, I'm just using myself as a third-party example. So, as I've said in a ton of my videos, this is big, right? The twin who is you is awakening you to come into higher states of consciousness. This is a massive gift. It's a massive, beautiful gift that you have come into this incarnation to awaken to the truth, to the love, to the abundance, to all that is, right? And coming into inner union is a wonderful, beautiful thing, but it's not the end goal, as I said. Right? You continue to expand, you continue to evolve, you continue to grow, all of those sort of things. It doesn't stop, it doesn't end. But there is a grand purpose to all of us awakening en masse in this moment of now. Right? So as best as you can, especially to those of you who have been asking me, and we've been working on this stuff, really fall into that higher awareness that you have a very grand purpose here, and that's huge in and of itself, that's huge in and of itself. So that's what I have for you guys. I hope that makes sense. I kind of feel like I went a little bit around and around. I hope that makes sense, you guys, and I hope that assists you. So thank you to all my new subscribers. I really appreciate you guys. I've had a lot of people asking me, yes, I do one-on-one coaching. The links are in the description box. And yes, I also have a course, which is also in the description box. That stuff is also on my website, you guys, for those of you who have asked. So I hope that you guys have an awesome day.